Hello and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have two amazing guests to introduce to you now. Dr. Jen Unwin is a clinical health psychologist and has spent her professional life interested in the role of hope in chronic disease and how it can be used to bring about behavior change. Dr. David Unwin is a general practitioner and family doctor and became an expert in managing chronic diseases. Their combined insights teamed up perfectly with Dr. David Unwin's interest in bringing about drug-free type 2 diabetes remission. For many years, they have been running group sessions in primary care to achieve just that, so far for over 100 patients getting off their medications. This combination has also worked online, helping hundreds of thousands of people virtually through a low-carbohydrate course featured on diabetes.co.uk. Both doctors were featured in a BBC TV documentary, The Truth About Carbs, that was seen by over 3.7 million viewers. Dr. Jen Unwin has also recently written a book, A Fork in the Road, to help people with food addiction. This is an insane pleasure and honor. Welcome, Doctors Unwin, to Boundless Body Radio.
Thanks so much, Casey. We're delighted to be here.
Yes, thank you, Casey.
I have been looking forward to this conversation for a very, very long time. You guys are up in northern England, is that correct?
Yes, we're near to Liverpool. Probably many of your listeners will have heard of Liverpool. So we're about 15 miles just north of Liverpool on the coast. We can nearly see the sea from our bedroom.
Wow, that must be so nice. My wife spent some time in a little city called Ripon, and we've also hosted recently a former Olympic swimmer from England, and he was up in Darlington, I want to say. Is that anywhere near where you guys are?
Yeah, not so far.
Well, of course, nothing is very far away in the UK compared to you, is it really? So we're all quite near. But people always think we know each other because there's so few of us, but that's not true.
That's amazing. My wife just always talked about how amazing it is to be in a place that has so much history and nuance to it. You know, when we talk about history around where I am, recorded history is like 150 years. It's about as far back as it goes, and where you are, thousands and thousands of years. It's so cool.
Yeah,
it is. That's another subject for another podcast, but we're both quite interested in, we're both very interested, in fact, in history and particularly older houses, that kind of thing.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Well, you guys are such a power couple doing such amazing work. I would love to hear about your personal story and how you got involved with low carbohydrate diets and helping people manage chronic diseases.
Yeah, well, it's quite an interesting story. It's probably about 10 years ago now, actually. So it's been quite some time. And a few things came together, as they often do, to sort of spark this work that we've been doing. One is probably my own story, really, which is one of a lifetime of weight gain, weight loss, struggles with food, sugar addiction, et cetera, et cetera. And I stumbled across a book by a British GP called Dr. John Briffa called Escape the Diet Trap. I think it was 1 January and I was feeling particularly miserable about my weight. And I saw this book and obviously the title spoke to me. So I brought it home. And then I would read bits out to David. It basically was low carb. And John Briffa had sort of discovered that for himself, looked into the science, and then written a lovely book, which was quite a nice sort of simple intro. And I'm reading bits out for David, and as was my way, I thought, right, okay, this is the next scheme. I was always doing the latest diet scheme, Weight Watchers, Slimming World, etc., etc. And so I thought, right, I'm going to do this low carb thing. Anyway, it was quite the revelation for me, really. I went cold turkey, as some people will have also done, and felt pretty grim for about 8 days. But then the lights came on, and I felt amazing. And I thought, right, this is the way for me. And some of the facts that I was reading out to David about how much sugar was in bread and things like that, he was sort of slightly interested in. And then I'll let him take over in a minute, because at the same time, he was going through a sort of personal crisis at work, really. Yeah. Over to you, David.
Yes. So I was 55. I was a senior partner of a medium-sized general practice, and I wasn't really enjoying myself. It was just that everybody seemed sick, and they were getting sicker and sicker. And I'd give them one drug, and then I gave them another and another. Nobody looked well, really. That is until one patient a single lady changed my life and the life of many other people. So I'd looked after this lady for over 10 years with her husband, actually. And I knew from the computer system that she wasn't taking her drugs for diabetes. And that worried me. So I wrote to her and asked her to come and see me. When she came to see me, I actually didn't recognize her because she'd lost so much weight. She looked absolutely fabulous.
Wow.
Far more than that, she was cross. She was very cross. And she was cross because she said, Dr. Unwin, you've been prescribing drugs for me all this time. And you know I have diabetes, but you never once told me that bread was sugar, that breakfast cereals turned into sugar, that potatoes turned into sugar. And now that I know that starch is sugar, I've been able to do without medication. I've lost stones in weight. So you were giving me those drugs quite unnecessarily. And she actually even wondered whether I was qualified. So I was scared, and I was quite scared. And I thought, I need to listen up. I need to pay attention. And that was the link between us and diabetes.co.uk that you mentioned earlier, because she was on their low carb forum. And to my amazement, there were 40,000 people teaching each other how to go low carb. So Jen had been going on about the book, and I'd started thinking a lot more about why do they have diabetes? Is it a genetic thing, or is it what they've been eating? And I suddenly saw in sharp focus, my patients were ill because of what they'd been eating. And if we could help them to eat differently, maybe they could replicate what this lady had achieved. And now we've gone all the way. So I had never seen drug-free diabetes remission. I hadn't seen it a single time in 25 years of medicine. And as you said earlier, we've just celebrated our 100th patient that achieved that.
So up to that point, 10 years ago, we'd never actually worked together. I was a psychologist, David was a GP in the same small town, but we haven't actually done any joint projects. And that was something as well that we were kind of interested to do, because obviously health psychology and medicine do go together really well. So we kind of united around this idea of trying to help the patients with diabetes at Norwood Avenue. And I was used to running groups, something I did quite a lot at work and was confident with, whereas most doctors and GPs, that's not something that they'll do. But it actually works really, really well in this context of sort of chronic conditions and behaviour change, because everybody encourages everybody else. And it's just a really nice way to work with people. So we just started with one small group, and kind of all the rest is history, really. So we started with about 15 people, I think, in that first group, and some of them are still joining now. We still run the groups now, and anybody can carry on coming, and quite a few of them still do after 9 or 10 years.
Wow.
What surprises me now, Casey, when I think back, is how really, why don't doctors think more about behavior change? Because so many of the chronic modern illnesses are due to choices that we make, lifestyle choices. So we need to help people change behavior. And the experts in behavior change, of course, are psychologists. And what I had missed is that I was married to an expert in behavior change. And she was a bit neglected in that way, because there she's an expert. And when we started mixing what I knew about physiology and what I learned about diet, and what Jen knows about changing behavior and motivating people and giving them feedback, I think that is the power that we've unleashed, where you mix these two disciplines, psychology and general medicine, very powerful together.
Mm. I mean, when I hear your story, and I follow you guys for so many years, I just, the word that comes to mind is synergy. You're right. Like it's a 1 + 1 = 3 kind of thing. You're right. It is very powerful and deep what you can do for these people when you combine those two things. You mentioned something really interesting, and it was all about practitioners taking the time to really sit down and think what they can do to have, help their patients with behavior change. And I want to go back and like ask you, like 15, 20 years ago, why you didn't do that sooner. And I would suggest that when are you going to be able to do that? How are you going to have time to be able to do that when you can only see people like, every 10 minutes? You're not paid in that way. You got into the business to really help people, and you're finding that like it's really hard to help people when you're slinging pills at them. I can really empathize with feeling like you're in this business because you really wanted to help people and it's not working, and that would be really tough. That's very difficult.
Yeah, I think that was what was dawning on me when I was 55 years old. And my perspective now is that the paradigm I was working in was take a history, examine patients with a view to what drugs do they need to sort them out, not with a view to why is this patient ill. That's a different question. What drug might be a sticking plaster to the problem is so different from the question of, but really, why are you ill? And I think now what Jen and I find is more and more conditions improve when we get the diet right. So we started off obviously thinking about type 2 diabetes, and then we went on to improving fatty liver, and then we noticed blood pressure was improving, lipid profiles, skin quality. And then more recently, Jen particularly is focusing on mental health, because that seems to improve with better diet. And these are all conditions that I was previously using drugs for. And it's so exciting when we can use a lifestyle approach in the National Health Service. So I think that's an interesting.
The other thing, Casey, is around for doctors, they're just not trained in behaviour change. They haven't got any confidence in that. So they, like you say, yeah, they were kind of stuck. Most people are stuck because they've only learnt one model. then that model isn't working because however many tablets you added into some of these patients, they were never going to be well people, as David says. So yeah, I think it's a matter of confidence and competence as well. And that's something we really hope to also spread. David has the other doctors come and sit in his surgeries so they can see how he does it. He speaks, obviously, as you know, at lots of conferences, and we're involved in this charity called the Public Health Collaboration, and he has a Google group with how many doctors? About 400 health professionals in now. So wow. When we started over here in the UK all those years ago, we were the only people doing it, I think. So we've sort of learned as we've gone along, but now we're very much about trying to spread that knowledge and those skills more widely. And I think there is hope. I think the younger generation of doctors are quite interested in this sort of different preventative lifestyle approach.
It's interesting. I think it's a modern phenomenon now where we have what really this was a grassroots revolution rooted in social media. So the lady that taught me had learned from social media, and there were 40,000 of them, and now there are hundreds of thousands and maybe millions of people low carb around the world. And then the primary health care physicians have been noticing patients doing well, and then they're getting interested. And I'm finding really very large numbers of people in primary care are showing an interest in this. And it's genuinely grassroots as it sort of bubbles up from ordinary people into GPs. And I sometimes wonder if the specialists are going to be the last people to really see what's going on. Just back to psychology before we move on, something that Jen taught me. I used to think that I was using psychology because I used to threaten my patients. So that was, I used to scare them with, negative. So I used to scare them with, of course it's okay to do what you want, but I won't, don't blame me if you die, sort of thing. We call that shroud waving in general practice. And what I'd missed was that threatening people, or what Jen taught me, is, for instance, the hope of putting your diabetes into remission, coming off medication is a wonderful shining hope. And it's a lot more powerful to give people hope than it is to give them fear of death, amputation, all those things. And I'm grateful to Jen. This idea of hope is absolutely central to what she teaches.
I love that message. I'm fortunate enough that I have never had to deal with chronic disease in my own personal life. And you guys have seen it so much in all your patients. And I mean, what is that contrast like to feel completely hopeless? Like you're given this diagnosis and like, there's no chance you're ever going to, improve your conditions based on the standard of care. That must feel terribly hopeless for people.
Yeah.
Well, this is what excites me about what we do now, because of course, I used to watch people when I told them they had diabetes or high blood pressure or whatever. And then I'd say, well, just start you on medication. And it was always a very sad consultation. And if you contrast that with what I see in their eyes now, when I point out that of all the people that go low carb, that choose to go low carb, 50% of them may well achieve drug-free remission if they're interested in changing their lifestyle. And those people, they come alive, they're really interested, and they want to work with me. That's completely different from the sort of depressing medicine I was wading my way through until 2012.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, 100 people coming off of medication, it's just a number, like it's really easy to pass by, but it occurs to me, like, think of every one of those individuals as a person, as a life, as a soul. Think about their families. Think about their children. Yeah. Like there's so many relationships that were improved because of your work.
Yeah, it's really true. We've found out, and I'm sure you have as well, is that when one person kind of gets it, in inverted commas, and they look so much healthier, they feel so much better in themselves, people say to them, their family and friends will say to them, wow, what have you been doing? And then, of course, they tell them. And it's like a kind of virtuous virus, really. And we've really noticed that in the community. And, even just where we live along the road here, a couple of our neighbours who are farmers have gone low carb just because we've spoken to them about it, and they're much healthier, and then they've told other people. So, yeah, it's fantastic to see that. That sort of just spreading naturally through families and communities.
I love Jen's idea of the virtuous virus. That's a great idea. And of course, within practice, what that is doing, so our remission rates, so at the moment, looking at the practice as a whole, we've got 9,500 patients, got about 500 people with type 2 diabetes. And at the moment, our overall remission rate for the entire diabetes register is just over 20% of everybody in my practice has achieved all of the people with diabetes. But what's happening is we are learning the remission rate started at 3%, 5%, 7%, 10%, etc.
Because the other doctors are doing it.
And this is the virtuous virus again, where healthcare professionals are believing in what we do, and they see me do it, and then the young doctors are replicating this, and the nurses. And then very often I'm finding I help the wife, she helps the husband, the sister-in-law comes in, we help her as well, and it spreads and spreads. So I don't know, we haven't plateaued yet in terms of how many people can be helped by this approach. We are still learning and still improving our figures.
And also the sooner you catch people on the journey, the more likely you are to be successful. So that was the data that came out of the sort of big review of all the cases so far, that those people who you catch in the first year, what was the percentage there?
So it's interesting actually. If we look at people with pre-diabetes, I can get 96% of those to have a normal blood sugar. 96%. If we look at people who are then diagnosed with diabetes and they've had diabetes for less than a year, I can get 76% of those into remission. Then, so the longer you have diabetes, what's interesting is you will still get very significant improvements in diabetic control, but your chances of achieving drug-free remission are diminishing. Though I should tell the listeners, I've got people who had diabetes for 20 years who still achieved remission. So it doesn't mean it won't happen. It's just a bit less likely.
Mm. Wow. I mean, those numbers are incredible. If you had medications that would do that, they would like from day one would be $1 trillion medications. It's crazy.
Yeah, it really is.
An interesting figure on that is, so my practice, we save about £60,000 per year on the diabetes drug budget alone, just on drugs for diabetes. And if every GP in the UK spent, as I do, on the patients with diabetes, the country would save £270 million.
Wow.
So it would be more in dollars, of course.
That's incredible. That's so amazing. If I look back on my career, some of my fondest memories were teaching seminars, also in a group setting. It was something that similar to you, I would do it for free. I didn't charge anything to do it. In fact, it would take me a lot of hours to put together these classes, these seminars, have, worksheets with references and things like that. My company that I was working for didn't even know that I was doing it. Like at the beginning, it was like a kind of an underhanded way to teach people how to do low carbohydrate diets. And I would throw some, diet doctor meal plans at them or something and kind of help them along. And over time, people started, learning about keto and carnivore and started embracing those things a little bit more. But it was interesting what you said earlier, that group dynamic and the psychology of change. It really is amazing when you get a group of people together, because you'll have, one or two people that have done it for a while and they're already succeeding. You'll have one or two people who are brand new, who have questions, and they don't just have to learn from me who, this dope, I'm just throwing out information at them. They're having conversations with each other, and it's really quite powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, it's incredibly powerful, because like that, you were in a certain community at work, and we're in this small community here, and people in the group identify with each other. They're similar enough that they think, oh, they're a bit like me. So like you say, there's someone who's a little way ahead. We soon had one or two people who did amazingly and lost lots of weight and came off medication. And as you say, they're then hope for the new people coming in. It's like, well, they're like me. If they can do it, so can I. And look what they've achieved. So that gives people that kind of hope and motivation. And also this wonderful thing in humans, isn't there, about mirror neurons, that where you see, it's how we survive, basically. If we see other people doing something, we tend to also do that. We tend to sort of go with the norm of the group. So if the group is talking about being low carb and what the kind of things they eat and, how they're doing it, then everyone in the group tends to sort of adopt those behaviors sort of effortlessly. It's much easier than when you try and do it on your own, unsupported. So yeah, I really believe in the magic of the group process.
Another important thing that I'd like to add is all of us sooner or later face carb creep, where you have one biscuit and then two, and then you're having ice cream, so on. And I've discovered you really have to, in primary care, factor in long-term support of people, because everybody goes to a party or the Christmas or something, and then they put on a stone in weight, and then they need help again. And the groups are great for that, because they can come back, they're welcome back into the group. And we're really happy to work with people again and again over the years while they learn the lessons of how to do Christmas, low carb, or a holiday, or whatever. So group work achieves loads of different things, lots of different things.
Yeah, people are always going to have those problems or difficulties, like David says. We've all done it, where we've sort of gone off track, and it's great to not see that as a failure, but just as we always say, it's just a learning opportunity. What would you do differently next time? And maybe other people in the group will make suggestions about how they do Christmas, or this what recipe, we do this at Christmas, or we do. And that long-term support in the culture that we live in is absolutely essential, because people are always being drawn back to the norm, which is processed food and refined carbohydrates and sugar, and every celebration is about sugar everywhere you go, every restaurant, so you need those strategies, you need that long-term support to keep doing this thing that you want to do, but you're kind of being pulled off track.
That brings me to another subject, which is perhaps a more recent focus of our work. So we were endlessly curious, really, as to why patients fell off the wagon. What was going on with our people who were gaining weight? And this led to Jen's fascination with the idea of carbohydrate addiction or food addiction, because so many of the behaviors we were seeing in very overweight people were similar to what I see with people with an alcohol problem. And I've come to the conclusion that Jen is right when she says that so many people are actually addicted to some foods. And this is an important point, because it means you can't be, if you're addicted to whiskey, you can't have just half a glass of whiskey, or who can have half a cigarette. That we need to bring what we know about addiction to bear in trying to help people who may have food addictions. And I've seen people crying about their relationship with bread or other things that, maybe if you weren't food addicted, you'd find surprising. So this is really how Jen came into the idea of food addiction.
Wow. Okay, so food addiction. This is so real. I could not believe it. And so many years in my career, I always, preached balance, and you can have a little bit of everything and it's okay. And moderation is totally fine. Enjoy desserts. I've been on a fairly strict, more kind of like a carnivore diet for several years now. I'm a personal trainer. I'm a nutrition coach. So I'm very aware of this stuff. Like, this is my entire life. A few weeks ago, I decided it would be a good idea, like to go off my diet a little bit. And I bought a pie. And I thought, no big deal. I've had pie in the past, and it's tastes good, and it's apple, and it's it'll be fine if I just have a few bites. I could not stop. I couldn't stop myself. I just ate and ate and ate and ate. And I sweated all night. I didn't sleep hardly at all. And what little sleep I got, when I woke up, my anxiety about everything in my life was through the roof. It was insane. And I realized, like, I'm totally a sugar addict as well. I'm a food addict as well.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I mean, we've done the same, obviously, and people do that. That the opportunity arises, or for whatever reason, you justify having a pie or a dessert because you're at an amazing restaurant or whatever. Yeah, well, we've done the same. Totally. Yes. Yeah. That I agree with you. I think it's hard for people. So there are some people who can do moderation. My mother-in-law is one of them, and she can have a box of chocolates in her house from last Christmas, and she'll have maybe one every week or something. It's unbelievable. Some people have a slightly more problematic relationship with food, will maybe tend to overeat at times, and then there's a very specific group, and it's probably up to about 10% of the general population who have a real problem, an addictive problem with certain foods, and it's nearly always sugar, refined carbohydrates, and ultra processed foods. So people don't have that addictive relationship with real whole foods on the whole, and the moderation advice will just not work for those people, and that's why they've failed, and like I did, kept failing, because you'd do a diet, and then you get to your goal weight and you think, right, well, now everything in moderation, and then you wake up 3 months later and you've put all the weight back on again. So
when I think back, I observed that in clinical practice, and people would be yo-yo dieting for 20 years, weight up and down, and inevitably they'd come to the conclusion that there was something wrong with them, that because they didn't have a model to explain their behavior. They thought, well, I'm obviously weak. I'm lacking, maybe I'm not very bright, or what's the reason? And it's very depressing for people to think that. And when you substitute those sort of thoughts for the idea that you could be addicted to these foods, is that a possibility? For some people, it's a relief, because it suddenly makes sense when they think about their relationship with food afresh. And really, as I say, it's all credit to Jen for thinking so much about this.
Yeah, and then you can help them then to identify the foods that they really just need to abstain from. And people understand that they understand that model because they know about people who have a problem with alcohol, or they know about people who smoke, or, you know, they know that the treatment in a sense is abstinence. So once they've got that model and they understand, right, abstinence is easier. You know, it's not always easy then to get to that point of abstinence, but at least you've got that journey, you've got that path that you're going to follow. And that's, I've written a lot obviously about it in the book that you mentioned, the Fork in the Road book, which is the kind of simple guide really for what do you do if this is you have this problematic relationship with certain foods. So some kind of tips in there.
Could I just point out that Jen doesn't make any money from the book, the Fork in the Road book. All of the money goes to the Public Health Collaboration. So she doesn't earn a dime or a cent or whatever you would say.
Which is our favourite charity.
Because that's our favourite charity. So you're not making us rich by buying the book.
You guys are amazing. I love you guys. That's so cool. I love learning about that. That's amazing. So psychologically, Jen, since you've done so much work in this, what are some things practically that people can do once they, you know, learn that about themselves, that they are, you know, addicted to food, addicted to sugar? What are some things practically that they can start by working on to maybe get some like small wins to build some momentum in the beginning?
Yeah, definitely. So the thing to recognize for people is that see it as an addiction. And that means, of course, that your brain, your sort of reward center in the brain is sort of being hijacked by whatever it is. It's driving you, cravings, and it's in the very sort of primitive part of the brain, the part that's really to do with survival and motivation. So you're not going to outthink this problem. You're not going to sit there and think, oh, right, okay, I obviously don't need to eat these things. Because we've all had that experience, haven't we, where you get tired or hungry or emotional, and even though you've said to yourself, I'm not going to eat pie or biscuits or whatever it is today, you kind of watch your disembodied hand reaching for those things, you know, opening the biscuit barrel and eating them, even though you'd kind of intended not to. And that's because we're driven by these sort of quite primitive parts of the brain that can override our logic. So planning and preparation are really important. So if you want to cut down or cut out the sugars and the starchy foods, the first place to start, and I'm sure you tell your clients this as well, is to clear the house out. Because if it's in the house, you're going to eat it. It's almost certain, you know, that if there was a pot, I mean, peanut butter is one of my problematic foods. If there was a pot of peanut butter in the cupboard, I would end up eating it. So I just had to stop buying it in the end. So clear out your cupboards. If you're living with people who don't all want to do this, just make sure you have your own cupboard or your own space for your food. So when you go and look for food, there's only things there that are on your plan that you want to eat. So I would say planning and preparation and, you know, thinking about the food, having the right food in is actually a really great number one place to start.
And if I could add a couple of pointers as well, it's really important to explain to the people that love you why you are doing this.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they will say, go on, just have a biscuit, or I made this for you. So it's really important to explain to your partner or your mum or your dad or whoever it is, this is really important to me. Please help me achieve this goal. I want to be free of sugar or whatever it is, because you're more likely to succeed if you have a team working with you. And then I've just got my last hint. I've learned this from patients, and I say, well, what went wrong? And what went wrong was there was an emergency and we didn't have any low carb food in. Somebody went to hospital, something happened, and that was, so plan for things going wrong. Have something in your store cupboard that you can eat. So it might be corned beef or a jar of pate or something, and also have it in the car so that there are no circumstances when you can't get to some low carb food that you can eat, because otherwise we all have emergencies in our lives. And as you said yourself, Casey, one pie can be 2 months' pies. So it's worth thinking ahead and make sure in your store cupboard is a tin or something that you can have in that emergency.
Yeah. And the other thing I'd say is, yes, some of it's about the food, isn't it? So getting the food right, planning it, having it in. getting yourself on that's step one, isn't it? You can't really move on until you've managed to be abstinent from these things. But really then thinking about, often food has crowded out many other things in people's lives, particularly people who've got, who have quite a severe problem with this. Their lives have become focused around food, eating, not eating, getting the foods that they want. And they've often started avoiding socializing or avoiding other things that they used to enjoy. So the next phase is definitely putting the things back in your life that are going to give you what food's been giving you. So, because food, we've been using it to get the feel-good transmitters like dopamine and serotonin. And they do boost those things in the short term, but they kind of wreck your brain in the long term, and you're sort of digging a hole. So as you cut down the food, you need to start thinking about what you're putting in your life in its place. Getting outside in the sunshine, taking exercises, any kind of exercise, but walking is perfect. Maybe taking up some hobbies that you've given up. Maybe doing something in a group, or there's all kinds of ideas that people might have, but it's about how you get those feel good neurotransmitters, because you're not going to be getting them in those high doses, if you like, from the food. Obviously you'll get them to some extent from eating, but it's about the whole life plan. It's not just about the food.
I love all of that. Those are all really great, very easy, practical tips that people can remember. Getting support from loved ones. I mean, if any of my loved ones came into my life and said they needed that, I'd be more than happy to support them. I love the always being prepared too. It's so funny. Like, we generally do fasting for most of the day, and we eat like once a day, and it's normally like in the evening. And we had a flight to Mexico on our first vacation since the pandemic a few weeks ago. And it's like a 5-hour flight. So I didn't really think about food at all. It wasn't going to be a big deal. We could wait until we got to the resort. Well, the plane broke. So we waited at the airport for another 5 or 6 hours before we even boarded the flight, which means we were getting hungry when we were in the air. Yeah. And now there's no options, and we didn't bring anything. And so we were starving, and we would have eaten anything. So I think that's a really important thing to think about.
Yeah. When we fly to America from here, I cook pork belly strips, salt them, and put them in a Tupperware. And we took them on the Atlantic flight, because they're just, the meals are tiny. I'm like, today, the meals are minuscule, so they just would drive me mad. Like, if you pick the meat out of what you get on an airplane, you've got like a teaspoonful, haven't you, practically? So I always cook some meat and take it along with me. It is about thinking ahead. And I'm not worrying about looking like a bit of a weirdo, because you're doing it for your own health. You know why you're doing it, and it's the right thing for you.
Well, I wish you could travel back a few weeks and teach me that lesson, because that would have been really helpful. I would love to be the weirdo with pork in the plane. That sounds great. Well, I think it's one thing to have a really strong base of knowledge in some of the stuff, and it's a totally different thing to be able to communicate that effectively. And you guys have really cracked the code on how to communicate effectively these messages. And one of the things, David, you in particular, leverage are these just amazing infographics. Can you tell me why that was important for you to involve, visual guides and tools like infographics to help your patients?
Yeah. Well, one of the most important things about being a general practitioner is I've only got 10 minutes to solve whoever comes in, and people vary a lot in how they learn and how they want to have things communicated. And when I got into this at the beginning, I could see that the glycemic index and the glycemic load, that is how sugary foods are, is really important. And I wanted my patients to understand the consequences in terms of blood sugar of the food choices they made. But I was having a problem in 10 minutes explaining the glycemic index and the glycemic load to patients. And I was boring the partners in the practice. So much so that Dr. Schultz, one of my partners, said, "Please go away, David, and could you come up with an easier way to talk about the glycemic index and the glycemic load, because it is a bit boring as it stands now." So I was really thinking about, well, why is it boring, and why are people not understanding what I'm saying? And I realized that for my patients, they don't really understand glucose as a substance because they don't cook with it. They don't know much about it, nor can they really visualize grams. They don't really cook with grams. So I came up with the idea of why don't we redo the maths on the glycemic load of foods in terms of something they do understand, which is teaspoons of sugar. And that's how I came up. I discovered that 150 grams of boiled rice in terms of your blood glucose is equivalent to 10 teaspoons of sugar. So whether you have 10 teaspoons of sugar or a small bowl of boiled rice, doesn't make a lot of difference in terms of your blood glucose. And boiled potatoes are very similar. 150 grams of boiled potatoes, about the same as 9 teaspoons of sugar. A bowl of breakfast cereal is probably 8 or 9 teaspoons of sugar. And so that was the basis of the teaspoons of sugar infograms, which are there on my Twitter account. They're not copyrighted. There are, I think, 7 of them now, and they've been translated into 14 languages, so that really millions of people have used these infograms. And if anybody wants to see them or use them, if you just Google capitals PHC and then Unwin and sugar, that's the charity we help set up, and the sugar infograms are all there for you to look at and think about your own diet, because people often forget, for instance, bananas or orange juice. They don't understand how much sugar there is in there. So that's the story of the teaspoon of sugar infograms.
And make a donation to the PHC if they're any use to you. There's a donate button on the website.
Jen, thank you. So there is, yes.
That's amazing. I think it's so cool that you guys are putting all of this wonderful education and information out there and doing it for free and getting this message out, because it's so powerful to see the sugar cubes. And you wouldn't think things like rice or potatoes, like that's healthy food for most people. Then you don't even consider, if you eat that, when your blood sugar crashes after the insulin cleans it all up out of the blood, you're going to be hungry again. You're going to be more likely to have even more sugar and even more sugar and more sugar. It's crazy.
Yeah, and that's the roller coaster I was on. And David often says, we were hungry the whole time. We were just always thinking about food and what we were going to have our next meal. And I'd always base it around, I'd always kind of start boiling the pasta or the rice before I'd even decided what to have with it. That was how we'd been brought up. Yeah. And we live so differently now. And I can go like you, 24 hours really easily without eating, and often longer than that.
I've been thinking about what's the quickest way to help my patients understand a sort of meal plan, a low-carb meal plan. And I think you just begin with the protein, Casey. I don't know. That's what we do. We look what meat or fish or what are eggs, cheese. So you begin with protein, and then it's what green stuff might you add to the protein to make it tasty, and a bit of sauce. And that's your low-carb meal. And that's mostly how Jen and I live, really. Begin with the protein. Add some sauce, which may have some fat in it, or a bit of butter is fine, or it might be fatty meat. But really, we're basing it, I think, on protein. Do you agree, Jen?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
That's great.
I'm not a nutritionist, I'm a psychologist, but I think people haven't, on the whole, people are scared of protein, and they don't eat enough of it, really. One of the reasons is, wondering if those high protein diets are causing any problems. And I don't know if you saw, but David's most recent paper is on the very topic of kidneys and protein with the low carb diet.
Right. I don't, have you seen that, Casey? The renal function and
I did just see that. Super interesting.
Did you? That was published. So we looked into that because when I did my public speaking, I'd find people say, "Aren't you worried about kidney function with all that protein, particularly for people with diabetes?" And actually, at that point, I didn't know what happened to kidney function. So it was Jen who said, well, why don't you've got hundreds of patients, why don't you trawl back through all the files and come up with the data? And we did. And what's surprising is I'd actually missed the fact that kidney function improves on low-carb diets for my patients. And the reason I'd missed it was most people just get a small improvement in renal function. And but it's nearly all of them. And so that's why I'd missed it. And we should bear in mind that because my average patient is 61 years old and because they've had diabetes for 5 years, what they should be looking at is deteriorating kidney function. So instead of finding what most doctors would find, which is deteriorating kidney function over 2.5 years, what we actually discovered was improving kidney function over 2.5 years. And that really is an amazing finding. I was obviously relieved, but it's another message of hope for people considering a low-carb diet.
I love that. That's amazing that you were able to go back and recollect some of that data and share that message. I think that's so important. I'm really curious to hear this. I consider myself extremely fortunate that I get to work with my life partner. We own a business together. We get to work together every single day. We usually share clients and stories, and we have a common goal to help improve people's health. And I'm wondering, through your career, what does it mean now to get to work with your life partner with a common goal of improving health? I just think it's so powerful, and I wonder how that's changed your everyday life.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been absolutely brilliant. The last 10 years have been such a journey. We just started off all innocently trying to help the people in David's practice. And then obviously it's been of great interest all around the world. So we've got to go and speak in some amazing places. We've met the most amazing people. Yeah, really at the end of the day, just helping those individuals and those families has been fantastic. And working together, it's been a real pleasure. And again, 1 + 1 is 3, isn't it, Casey? You kind of come up with some ideas and we bounce things off each other and talk about things like the data and stuff like that. So yeah, it's been really, really enjoyable.
Yeah, it's like, your partner is your best friend. And now you've got this amazing thing in common. And every run that we do together or every walk, it's lovely to just bounce it around without annoying each other or the other people saying, I'm bored of low carb. Can we talk about something
Which
else?
The family say.
Yeah, the family are fed up with us. But together.
When we go to a restaurant and we say, we have that without that.
So embarrassing. And I think it's been really it's such a privilege that I have a psychologist helping me. And I think it's great for Jen that she has a tame doctor helping her. Yeah. It dominates most of our lives, doesn't it, really?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm doing another podcast later. I'm kind of planning presentations all the time. I'm doing a lot of work on the sugar addiction, and I'm running some groups with a colleague where we're trying to collect some data on. There's very little on how do you actually help people with food and sugar addictions. Very little in the literature, partly because it's not really officially recognised as a official disease, if you like. So there's very little money for research. So we're running some groups. And we recruit for those and then run the groups, but we're collecting the data, so we've got that ongoing. A number of various little kind of sideline projects always running at the same time, but it's fun, and you wake up kind of excited to face the day and see what's going to come next.
Sure.
The other thing it's important that you maintain also balance, that we don't all become mad and bonkers. That's true. And so we still have to do things like playing with your grandchildren or gardening. Jen and I went on a camp about it. It was just so wonderful. And we do need to give ourselves the odd holiday so that we don't become insane. And that's important.
I love that. I love that. No, that's great. What an amazing thing to be able to share with each other and enhancing each other's lives, and just feeling like every day is such a joy to go and do something that serves the community and helps everybody out. It's so cool. I think it's such a wonderful example. This is a question for both of you. I'm going to start with you, David, if you don't mind. Can you share one thing about Jen that you would like the world to know about her? And then Jen, I'm going to ask you the same question about David.
One thing.
Careful what you say.
Oh my goodness, so many things to.
For $20, I can edit this part out.
Yeah,
that's how I make my money.
Yeah, one of the mysteries about Jen, for me, she's absolutely passionate about wool, and I can't understand it. So she's got this wool stash upstairs, so much wool, and she loves knitting. And she loves to go to a wool shop, and it's like wool porn for her, which is fine. but I just don't understand it. And it's lovely because she's so happy just knitting. I like to watch her knit. She's doing a scarf at the moment. She's been doing it for a year. And every day, the color of the wool for that day depends on the temperature outside. So she's knitting this amazing scarf, and the colors depend on the season, obviously, how warm or cold it is, and the actual temperature. So I don't think many people know that Jen's knitting that scarf, but now you all do. It's Jen. I wonder what Jen's going to say.
That's amazing.
So I think everybody needs to find that one thing that makes time kind of flow. So so that's what I do. I do knit. So what a lot of people don't know about David is actually wild birds in the UK, and he manages how many acres?
And they want more acres, but it's 8 different bird reserves.
They're kind of bird reserves. Most of them are sort of near us, that are bought by a charity called the Three Owls Bird Sanctuary that he's worked with ever since he was a boy. And he loves going around kind of doing the mowing and planting trees and just making beautiful nature reserves for British wildlife. He's really fascinated in that, the whole rewilding thing. So I think not everybody knows that.
That's so cool. I love that. The pandemic really helped me kind of slow down my life a little bit and enjoy things outside and walk more. And it's so fascinating to be out in nature and learn about the different birds and start watching them. And I could totally get into bird watching for sure. It's super interesting.
Yeah, and it's so so good for us that being outside in the daylight, connecting with nature. I think it's just another thing that we've slightly forgotten about. We both like to think in this kind of evolutionary way about health. Getting back to the, as Ken Berry calls it, the proper human diet, but also the diet of influences. So getting outside, getting that fresh air, playing with your grandchildren. We've forgotten partly what it is to be human and how we evolved, and that's why we're getting mentally and physically sick, I think.
And a related interest, of course, and how is the steak on your plate? How is that reared, and is it sustainable? So oddly, the interests marry up quite nicely. And I'll just finish with a lovely example. So one of the bird sanctuaries had a few wild orchids in it. Just a few beautiful purple orchids growing. And we put some sheep in over the winter to eat out the scrub. And Jen and I went back and counted the orchids, and they had quadrupled in number because the sheep were there over the winter. I was amazed by how many orchids there were. And that's a wonderful example of producing nutritious food in a sustainable way. And we actually improved the biodiversity on that particular reserve. And that's what I'm going to be pursuing now, looking at how I can do that with other bits of land.
Wow. That's so amazing. It's so true. Once us humans just get out of our own way and let nature do its thing, it's amazing how well and how perfectly it just kind of sorts itself out. And we just come in and muck everything up. And when we leave it alone, it just sorts it out. It's great. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, this has been such an amazing conversation. This is another question for both of you independently. I want to ask each one of you, what is one simple tip that you would like to leave with a listener from this conversation that they could take and apply in their lives and see benefit from?
I think for me, I'd have people give up table sugar. So when I'm trying to help my patients, the first thing I'm saying is sugar is empty calories. It's so dangerous in so many ways, and that I would have people give up table sugar, anything with sucrose sugar in it. I'd start with that because that's the first step for so many of my patients. It leads to many others, but it could give you the greatest gains in improvements in your health. Give up table sugar if it's at all in your diet.
Mine's probably... to be brutally honest about what you can't moderate, because we've probably all got something, and then think about giving that up. So you're over consuming, you're having way too many cans of Diet Coke or it doesn't even have to be things with sugar in it, sugar-free gum or whatever it is. Do you need to maybe think about cutting that out completely? Because for many of us, that not having it at all is just so much easier than having a little bit or allowing yourself it occasionally. Just be brave enough to cut some things out and see where you get to. I think people will often think, oh, I can't live without whatever it is. And actually, that's probably the thing you need to knock on the head and see how you feel. And I think you'd be really surprised by the results.
That is great advice from both of you. I think those are wonderful things to be thinking of. This has been an amazing conversation, Dr. Jen and David Unwin. Where would you like people to go to find you and your work and connect with you?
Okay, so I'm on Twitter at Jen_Unwin. That's the place I most hang out. They can find the book on Amazon, and the website is www.forkintheroad.co.uk. And also, might be of interest that I have a clubhouse every Wednesday night called Fork in the Road, Wednesday night UK time. So it's 6 p.m. UK time. It's kind of lunchtime US time. So Clubhouse, follow me again on Clubhouse at Jen_Unwin, or follow the club, which is called Fork in the Road, and that's on food and sugar addiction, and we have guest speakers, and it's usually a great conversation.
For me, it's a bit simpler, so I am at Low-Carb GP. I do about an hour a day on Twitter, and I think really hard about trying to disseminate good practice and hints and tips for people that are useful. So look for me on Twitter, please, at Low-Carb GP, and then all the teaspoons of sugar and other things are hosted by the PHC charity website. So just Google the PHC.
It's www.phcuk.org.
Well done, Jen. Thank you.
That is awesome. We will link to all of that in the show notes. I am just so grateful for you guys and your work and everything that you've done and everything that you share so generously for free, and all the people that you help. So thank you so much for everything that you do, and thank you for appearing on our show today. It's been an honor.
Thanks, Casey. We've really enjoyed talking to you.
We have, and all the people who are listening, thank you so much. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.